I've noticed a number of times during this conversation today that you've put quite a bit of focus on the word who you are and not what you are.
Yeah.
Can you give me the distinction?
We need to stop hiring people for what they can do for us and start hiring them for who they are. And I'll tell you why. Because when you hire someone with, as one example, a lack of integrity, I don't care what skills they bring, they're going to kill your company. The skills don't matter anymore. If you hire a bully into your company, no matter how smart they are a cultural parasite. They're a cultural poison. They will kill your team. And it only takes one.
Bob.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
What inspired you to help forge men into who God wants them to be?
Yeah. If I look back on my whole life, that's probably what God's called me to my whole life. But of course, it wasn't until my 60th birthday that I really saw that and decided to double down. And that's how the Timothy Foundation came to be. At my 60th birthday, I had the greatest 60th anybody could ever have. And it was, first of all, it was a week long. My wife threw a party for me on a Saturday, which was like 70 people that were peers my age. And then the next day it was a family-only thing. And then I forget what the next day was, but the following Saturday, 24 guys who had been essentially in my ministry over the years, and I had been close to, came in to dinner at a private club downtown, and each guy got up and spoke, and we laughed and cried, and at the end stood and sang "Great is Thy Faithfulness," and which I'm pretty sure is the only time "Great is Thy Faithfulness" has been sung in that club. But it was a great night. It was the kind of night that it wasn't just for me, but every guy in the room. And the next day I said to my friend, I mean, it was incredible, but couldn't anybody who had been in the ministry have that night? And he looked at me and he said, "Eagles don't flock, but last night they flocked for you." And what he meant was that every guy around the table was a CEO, a president, owned their own company, an admiral in the Navy, every guy. And I realized that had been God's call in my life. That's what I do, is invest in those guys. And so I was 60. I thought, I might live another 25 years, and I want to double down on that and really be focused on those guys. Didn't know what we were going to do. Originally, I thought, well, the church is in free fall crisis, and let's raise up leaders for the church that are those guys. The original idea was to just identify young leaders and pay for them to go to seminary. We would just raise the money and pay for them to go to seminary. Put together a board, and the board took 3 years to figure out what we really wanted to do. And at the end of that was a fellows program that would combine both the theological and business training, because we realized that so many of the pastors that needed business training, if you're a pastor of, at a not a very big church, you're doing HR and finance. You get to bigger churches and you've got a staff and marketing, and there's a lot of business stuff. But also the business guys are the ones who become elders and board members of Christian organizations, and they make a lot of the decisions for those organizations. And we wanted to give them some theological foundation so that as we know they're going to become the leaders of those boards, et cetera, that they would have a theological background. So the fellows program became both the theology and the business. So we took 3 years, figured that out, and sent an email out to everybody we knew and said, if you know a young male Christian leader who fits this description, asked them to apply. I did not want to be executive director. I had told the board, I won't do this. I'm not returning nonprofit. I had been in nonprofit youth ministry for 22 years and then had my own coaching consulting practice. And I said, I'm not going back to nonprofit. I don't want to be raising money. I don't want everything that comes with nonprofit. And then I read 18 applications and said, I have to do this. These guys are incredible, and I absolutely have to do it. And it has been the greatest joy ever to be able to walk with. I think we're going to graduate our 5th class in October, and it has just been, I can't believe I get to do this at this age. So it's a longer answer than you wanted, but yeah, that's how Timothy Foundation started.
Is there a linkage between a theological background and a business success?
To the extent that you learn to trust God more, sure. That the deeper theology helps you understand God's providence in all of creation and all of history. And I think that does inform business decisions. It talks about how you make your business decisions. I've said to a client who was saying, we want people on our team who work long hours, and it's a Christian client, and really, can take the midnight call and all that stuff. And I said, if you also want to be a company that honors God and is a Christian presence, you can't make work an idol. And you've got to figure out what the balance is there between, I understand the whatever it takes mentality and the get things done, but work like anything else can be an idol. And if you're going to proclaim that you are Christian leaders in this business, then you've got to be aware of all the potential idols.
What were you doing before your 60th birthday?
So out of college, I had 2 jobs in the business world. Was a volunteer with the youth ministry. Started on my MBA, and about 12 weeks into that, realized no, God had called me to the ministry, and I did 1 semester of the MBA and then left and went full time with the ministry, and was with that ministry for 22 years. And then I started my own consulting practice, and have been doing that. And that the consulting practice really evolved into a coaching practice at a time when nobody really knew what coaching was. My first coaching client was a guy who had been a Vision for Your Life client. We can talk about Vision for Your Life, but had been a Vision for Your Life client and called me and said, I've written my letter of resignation. And it was a partnership, and the partners were bullies, and they were trying to push him out. And I said, you are not walking away from a significant amount of money for a couple of bullies. And I said, you're going to hire me as your coach, and we're going to get through this together. And he said, what does that look like? I said, I have no idea. Give me 48 hours. And so I did a bunch of reading on there wasn't much about the coaching at all at that time. And I really thought, what does he need? Forget, what the coaching models are. What does this guy need? And I realized that his self-image was so beat up, he couldn't fight this fight. And so I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the next 6 months and get your self-image back. And you're going to call me, almost every day, and I'm going to come see you once a month, I think. And it wasn't cheap for him to do that, but he did. And I guess 5 years later, he was the last partner standing when private equity bought him out.
What's the overlap between consulting and business coaching and therapy?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I had somebody ask me that just 2 days ago, the difference between coaching and counseling. I gave him a very quick answer that I don't like, so I'll have to think of a better answer for you. I think that counseling, and I'm not a counselor and don't want to be, is dealing with the personal, psychological, dare I say, dysfunctional issues that people have. And coaching is not that. Coaching is saying, and by the way, executive coaching is different than personal coaching, life coaching. I'm not a life coach. I don't care how much you weigh, how much you eat, or how, all those things, obviously. So I'm not about a life coach. I don't care. I'm about executive coaching, about your leadership. How are you being the best leader, and what are the people dynamics? I also say, for me, it's executive coaching, but it's executive coaching on the people issues. But every business is a people business. Every business is people business. And so you have to be able to lead the people. It's always about the people, always. Every problem is a people problem. Every solution is a people solution. My favorite illustration of this is many years ago, Target had a data breach, and it was a big deal, and lots of people's information was compromised. They actually had the technology to prevent it, but the techies had turned it off. They didn't have a technology problem; they had a people problem. And the CEO was fired, and the CIO was fired. And he should have been fired because he created a culture of such arrogance that said, we know better than the technology. You don't have a technology problem. You have a people problem. And that's true across the board. You can't think of an industry where the problem isn't a people problem.
So you're working with this gentleman who, for 6 months, you said, okay, I'm identifying the crux of your issue with your business is your self-image.
It was his issue.
His issue.
That's generally true for everybody, but that was particularly true for him because his self-image, they were coming in and saying, we don't want you here. Right? He's a partner. They take away his parking spot. I mean, they just were every day telling him, you don't bring enough to the value to this. And so, by the time he called me, he was really done. And so by the way, in the ministry, I had worked for a boss who was a bully. And I had experienced being beat up and having the self-image crisis and knew what that was like and knew what it did to me and my ability to function. And so when I said to him, you're going to hire me as a coach and we'll get this together, I said, I've been there. I know what it is to have your self-image destroyed. The worst part about the ministry is what it does to your self-image.
What is the interlink between a clear understanding of one's own core values or core motivators, a understanding in faith in some higher power, and somebody's self-image?
We are created in the image of God. And our self-image, the clearest self-image comes from that. I am created in the image of God. I'm an image bearer. And God has made me in his image for his purposes. Potter and clay. We are the clay in his hand, and he molds and makes us for his purposes. And the right view of self-image is that, to say, some days I feel like a gorgeous pot in the king's palace, and some days I feel like a chamber pot, and everyone's pissing on me. And you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it depends on how God wants to use me. This is the change of paradigm. Because instead of saying, how do I use God? It's how does God use me? And how does he use this hunk of clay that he's created with my gifts, abilities, and my core motivator, my strengths, my weaknesses? You know, Paul says his glory is made perfect in weakness. God's glory is made perfect in weakness. He's quoting what Jesus says to him. So how do we embrace all of who we are, strengths and weaknesses, to God's glory?
In my culture, maybe it's my craft, maybe it's my age group, there's a lot of the phrase, oh, I hate myself. It's like, oh, I'm stupid. There's a lot of self-loathing, a lot of self-deprecative humor, or putting oneself down. It's almost like if what you're saying is that you're made in the image of God and you're putting yourself down, you're saying, oh, I hate myself. You're almost saying, I hate
You are.
the image of God.
You are. What you're really saying is, I hate what God made. I hate who God made. Yeah, it's just sin.
How do you make steps to get past the feeling that you hate what God made, who God made?
Well, I think one of the things is that we spend so much of our time looking side to side. We look over our shoulder, we see other people, and we say, I wish they were. I just heard a story or read a story of Whitney Houston having dinner with Luther Vandross. And the waiter comes up and he walks away, and Luther Vandross says, I wish I looked like him. And Whitney Houston says, but he can't sing. And Luther says, I don't care. And Whitney keeps saying, but he can't sing. You have been blessed and gifted with this incredible voice. But he looks at that waiter and wants to look like him. We all do that to some extent or another. We're looking side to side and saying, I want to be like them. And the answer to your question is to look at Christ, to focus on God and say, no, I want to be who you made me. And what's on my right and left don't matter.
As you've studied core motivators and vision for your life, and you've created kind of this matrix of what is your motivator, like what kind of personality you might fall into, have you been able to identify what people are looking side to side for, what they are envious or jealous of that they don't have in themselves, and how that aligns to a particular motivator that they might have?
No, there's no connection there, at least that I know, that I've seen. I think that because I think every core motivator does that. Every core motivator says, I wish I was like somebody else. But we just all do that. We don't appreciate the gifts that the Lord has given us. We don't appreciate the lump of clay that he's molded. And so for every core motivator, we say, oh, I wish I was something else. Well, there have been two huge surprises with the core motivator work. The first is that almost no one knows what their core motivator is. That's shocking to me. The second is that almost everyone's living out a second. And because they don't like the first, they think it's weak, and so they live out of their second, and that's been a big surprise. I didn't expect that.
Is it better to develop your strengths or fix your weaknesses?
Yeah, well, that's the Strength Finders book. The Gallup organization did a lot of research and wrote Strength Finders. Gosh, I don't know how many years ago. But the thesis of Strength Finders was there's very little upside to working on your weaknesses, and by leveraging your strengths and getting stronger at your strengths, you're much, much better.
Do most people default to focusing on the weaknesses?
I think our culture has told us to work on fix your weaknesses. And one of the core principles of Vision for Your Life is it's not know who you aren't and fix it. It's know who you are and be it. Know who you are and be that person. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Know who you are. Understand who God made you. Be that person.
What can seminary and theological studies teach a person about who God made them to be, what their skills are, what they might be good at?
Well, seminary doesn't necessarily exist for that reason. Seminary exists to equip God's people in the depth of understanding of the Scripture, mostly. I mean, there's some other things. I would add church history and some other kind of things. But mostly it's the deep, deep understanding of the total text of Scripture. And to have that perspective and that understanding, I was with some guys who are very well versed, very, very well versed. And one of the things that we have today is there's a gazillion podcasts out there, and everybody's listening to them and getting their theology from them, and which is on one hand okay, but what you don't get with that approach is this deep dive, an entire semester, 3 days a week on Acts and Paul, with copious amounts of reading to go along with it. For a semester, a deep dive, and to do that with all of it, the Gospels and then they divide up the Old Testament into the first 5, and then the historical books and the prophet. You get the deep, deep dive, and then of course you get original languages, so that you're able to, really understand. My Greek professor said it's important to know what it says, but it's more important to know what it means, and to be able to have the languages so that you can parse that too. So I started to say I know a lot of guys who can quote verse after verse of Scripture, mostly out of context and without a full theological understanding of the whole text. Does that make sense? I mean,
I feel like when one is studying, becoming a scholar of text and communication, one is also becoming a scholar of people.
Well, I think, again, every business is people business. My degree is from Covenant Seminary. And Covenant Seminary's stated purpose is equipping pastors. And so it's one of the things I loved about Covenant Seminary when I was there, particularly, and it's true today. Covenant really wanted pastor professors who had been pastors. They were teaching the next generation of pastors. And so it was not just academia. It was deep dive academics, but if this doesn't show up for the people in your care, then what have we done here? I was just with a guy, another pastor who resigned from his position. And he was beat up by some elders, and part of our goal is our investment in these guys in their 20s will make them better elders in their 40s. By the way, young elders is an oxymoron. So,
why is the church in free fall?
Well, the church is in free fall because we abandoned the mandate for discipleship and exchanged it for the quick, instant gratification of conversions. And the movement of evangelicalism that said, as long as someone prays the prayer on the beach or stands up at a camp or comes forward at a crusade, we're done. That's the goal, is to just get those moments, those conversions, and we're done. And we move on to the next group. I was told by a man I respected, about the ministry I was in, that we minister to a passing parade. We hit them, and then they move on, and we hit the next group. And I think that incredibly shallow approach to the faith resulted in a generation that had a very shallow approach to the faith. There's an old phrase that what you win them with is what you win them to. And when you win them with a shallow conversion experience, you have won them to a shallow Christian experience. And that shallow Christian experience resulted in a church that did not have the answers when the deep questions were asked by the culture. When the culture asked the questions of morality, and particularly in the 60s of sexuality and war and race questions, where the church did not have the answers and continued to not have the answers for the next 40 years, because we only cared about the conversion. How many people met Christ at your thing? I was at an event where a guy got up and spoke, and they have a ministry tool. I'm trying to purposely be vague, that they've taken around the world. And he said, we have figured out that it's $2 a conversion. And I was so horrified. I was so horrified, I didn't even know what to say or how to respond. I just stood there looking at him like, did you just hear yourself? This is really what this has come to? So, yeah, I think that's why what has gotten us to the place we're in, that when the culture came looking for deep answers, not only did we not have them, but we didn't have anybody who could give them. I think it's one of the reasons that Tim Keller became as popular as Tim Keller, as impactful as Tim Keller did, because he's the first guy since Francis Schaeffer to have some answers. You know, I mean, Schaeffer was in the 60s and it was awesome, but you know, we went for decades without anybody else, and Tim Keller comes along, and it's water on parched ground. And everybody has listened to and read Tim Keller. You know, I was reading something and talking about the PCA is a small denomination, but it has outsized influence because of Tim Keller. And praise God for him. I mean, it's wonderful. But we went for 40 years without those kinds of answers.
Do you think there's a linkage between someone having a lack of purpose, a lack of understanding of what their purpose is, and a lack of answers, like you're talking about?
Well, I think it's a fundamental question. Fundamental to who we are as people is, what do I do with my life? I've been given a certain number of years. I'm alive. Of course, I would ask, are you really? There's a lot of people. I mean, I have a house in Naples. There's a lot of God's waiting room. I'm really wonder if some of them are alive. But it's a fundamental question. Fundamental question is, who am I, and what will I do with my life? Fundamental. We start asking that question at a very young age. You know, I think most people ask that question, starting high school and certainly college. We get pictures and we say, maybe I could do that. Maybe this guy. And, I remember my best friend in high school, and his father was a very successful banker. And I thought, oh, that's what I want to be. Which is crazy, but.
I want to be a firefighter when I grow up.
Right.
What do I want to do?
Yeah.
But we've skipped over the what am I?
Who am I? We've skipped over the who am I for what do I want to do. And one of the principles for Vision for Your Life is that we mostly live plot-driven lives when we should live character-driven lives. There's this plot that we've all been, you're just going to go to school and you're going to get married, you're going to go to school, get a job, get married, have some kids, retire, play with your grandkids, and play golf and die. And that's the plot, and we try to figure out how we're going to fit into it. And when the absolute reverse is true, we should start with the character. Who am I? Who am I as a person, and what does it look like for me to be me every day? And then how do the various pieces of the plot can fit into my life? Build your job into your life, not your life into your job.
Can people be lazy, or are people just lost?
Well, yes. I mean, they can be lost and lazy, and lost and not lazy. I mean, there are a lot of people working very hard at things that they're lost in. Yeah, and there are a lot of lazy people who aren't lost. So those are not necessarily mutually exclusive. One of my other principles is there's a reason for everything. There's absolute reason for everything. There's a reason I'm sitting here with you today. People don't wake up one day and say, I think I'll be lost. I think I'll be lazy. I think I'll ruin my kids' lives and my marriage by having an affair. People don't wake up and do that. They get there over time. It's a relationship that's not fulfilling to them. It's not going anywhere, and they start to flirt with somebody, and it's 6 months, it's a year, it's 2 years later, there's an affair, and they don't know how they got there, etc. They don't wake up one day and say. But the same is true with the other things. I don't think people wake up one day and say, I think today I'll be lazy. They get there over time because they get depressed and they beat their head against the same wall and they don't see any progress. And people don't say, I think I'd like to be lost. They can't get direction over a period of time, and then they are lost.
How difficult would it be for somebody who has a really clear understanding of who they are, what their core motivators are, what their purpose is, to then also end up being lazy?
I think that's one of the best things about core motivator is I don't know anyone. I'm trying to think through the Rolodex quickly. I don't think I know anyone who, having understood who they are, becomes lazy. Because it's so energizing to be who you are. It's part of the wonderful design of God is that when we're doing who we are, bad syntax I know, but when we're doing who we are, we're absolutely energized. I remember being in seminary and all this Reformed theology and all this God's in control of it all, and thinking, well, then why should we do anything? Why should we work if it's all going to be God? And then also looking around, and all the faculty that I knew were the hardest working people I knew. And it took me a while to figure out it's because they love what they do, because they're doing what they love. We've heard that, everywhere. And they're so energized by it, they want to do more. And when you get to that place in life, that's what absolutely energizes you. I was just in St. Louis, and I went one-on-one meeting from how did it go? 9 to 11:30, noon to 2, and 2 to 4, and then I driven to the plane, and I could have gone on the rest of the night because connecting core motivator, I'm energized by that. Absolutely energized by it. It's the most fun I can have. So, there's no chance of being lazy in that. But ask me to sit in a cubicle and, write code or do balance sheets, and I want to shoot myself, and I will become very lazy. I'll get it done out of pure discipline. But yeah, when you do who you are energized. I've
noticed a number of times during this conversation today that you've put quite a bit of focus on the word who you are and not what you are.
Yeah.
Can you give me the distinction?
Sure. And I will tell you, I just told a client, we need to stop hiring people for what they can do for us and start hiring them for who they are. And I'll tell you why. Because when you hire someone with a lack of, one example, a lack of integrity, I don't care what skills they bring, they're going to kill your company. The skills don't matter anymore. If you hire a bully into your company, no matter how smart they are a cultural parasite. They're cultural poison. They will kill your team. And it only takes one. And they'll kill your team. And it doesn't matter how smart they are. We get enamored with smart. We get enamored with gifts. Get enamored with abilities. And I'm saying those are way second in priority to character, who someone is. Are they trustworthy? What is their character like? Are they team players? Are they entrepreneurs? Are they what are the other characteristics that people bring to a party? We've all heard the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. And then we tolerate the cultural poison.
What would you say to a leader, a client who they have a team and there is a bad apple in the team, but they can't let them go because they bring too many clients in, or because they're all the expertise is in them, and there's a person who you've identified as severely lacking in character? What's the solution in that situation?
It's not simple and it's not easy. Once they're in, it's hard to get them out. So another one of my principles is process is everything. Process is everything. So the first thing you do is try to help them. Again, nobody wakes up one day and says, I want to be the cultural poison in this company. No one wakes up and says, I think today I'll be the bully. No one. They got there over time, and the first thing to do is to come alongside and say, hey, maybe with some coaching and some help, we can help you become the person that you really are and not this problem. First step. But if that's not going to work, if they won't hear it, then there are other things you have to do in a process, not the least of which is hire their replacement while they're there. And so that you can have a smooth handoff. I've seen it. If it wasn't for client confidentiality, the stories I could tell you of these situations where we thought that the person could not be replaced, and they were absolutely cultural poison, and then they left anyway. And now you're trying to quickly hire their replacement. Everybody should have. Anybody can be hit by a bus on any day. Everybody should have the person who could take their place on the team all the time.
I came this past year. I feel like I finally developed the skill to be able to let relationships go. If there was a collecting core motivator, I probably have that. I could be a little collecty. I like collecting my experiences and sometimes relationships. I could identify with myself with feeling a desire to collect relationships, and then and being hit pretty hard when they would end, and maybe not ending them early enough if that needed to happen. And it is so fascinating to me, like on a film set in particular, you can have like a fabulous DP, like the cameraman, or you can have somebody who might not have that skill set, but they bring peace the moment they walk into the room, and the impact that makes on the whole team. And
of course you want both. You really want both. And I'm able to size up people pretty quickly. I don't know why that is. It's all I've always have. Mm-hmm. And so I can walk into a team meeting and observe it for an hour and say, and actually, by the way, probably like 15 minutes, and say, oh, there's your problems, and there's your superstars, and go with them. The people you don't let into your circle are more important than the people you do let into your circle. The people you don't let in, because they're going to, one person, one bully can kill a whole team. And the people you don't let in that's a more important decision than the people you do let in.
Oh man, the reaction I have to hearing that is like, I think we have a lot of talent scouts. Like a lot of businesses that will be like, oh, we got to find the right people to put on this team here. It's like, well, maybe if you start with saying, hey, what's the type of person that is going to ruin this team, and then these people aren't going to ruin the team. Let's take a deeper look at the people we have here, and how can they be the best people they can be? Like, how can we?
Yeah.
That almost turns it into like a grow state for the people you currently have instead of the search for the talent.
Yeah, now you do want the talent, and you need the talent, but you want people. But listen, there's how many billion people on the planet? You can find the people with the talent and the character. They're out there. It may take more work. You may have to, interview another set of people, but you can find them. We just don't value it enough. We just value, we value ability so much that and you know how much money gets spent fixing bad teams? How much time gets spent fixing bad teams? The economic value, the pure economic value of hiring good people it's a no-brainer.
I think I heard the number one expense in the Canadian government last year was consultants to help fix the internals of the...
Yeah, don't ask me about Canada. I lived there 10.5 years, but I'm not talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Canada.
Is there a crisis with men in today's culture?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is one of the raison d'etre for Timothy Foundation, is to invest next generation of Christian leaders, and at least at this point in time, it is exclusively male. And it's what was the 78% of all suicides are male. Overwhelming number of homelessness is male. We are in a true crisis with men. 60% of college admissions is female today. Only 40% is male. Graduation rates are the same, by the way. So we're in a real crisis with men in this country particularly. And there are all kinds of sociologists and all kinds of people talking about the whys. I do personally believe that the education system has been really geared for what women do best, not men, not boys. To sit quietly and listen and read is not what males do. And in order to make them do that, we drug them so that they'll sit quietly and read and listen. And I think that we have the results of that. So we're in free fall crisis with men, yeah.
How has the widespreadness in the past 25 years of pornography and its access to very young men played a role in your theory of why we have a crisis of men right now?
Well, that it has changed so much. Boy, when I was a kid, if you got a hold of a Playboy or a Penthouse, I mean, that was rare and a huge deal. today you're 2 clicks from anything you can imagine. And it's absolutely pornography may be the biggest scourge on our culture. Of everything else, it may be the biggest scourge. It is. I mean, for the obvious reasons, it takes what God designed for His glory, really, and abuses it for something else. But it teaches men that they don't need a relationship. They don't need a connection with a woman. They just need personal pleasure.
I know there's a lot of factors that play into kind of depopulation of certain modern nations like South Korea and some countries that are, Japan, that are steeply, the population is de-accelerating. The population growth is de-accelerating, and there's a lot of factors that play into, birth control and education. But I'm wondering if you just made all pornography illegal, I'm wondering how that would play a role in population. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't think that's our biggest problem with population, by the way. I think financial is the biggest problem. But I'm a mostly libertarian and believe in free markets and freedom, and I'm to the point where I think I wouldn't have a problem with pornography being illegal. It is such a deep scourge on our culture, and it's. We have lots of things that are illegal in this culture. Drugs, for example. I think you could probably make the case that pornography is worse than drugs. So the case to make it illegal would be that.
Think about cancel culture and the freedom of expression that we have, protected under our Second Amendment. It's like, okay, well, if you place pornography under that freedom, that right,
it is
also. I mean, think of all the things that you can't say, that you aren't allowed to express. It's like, well, but it's okay.
We're looking at a culture of men who, and I don't know the statistics, but the percentage that are, living in their parents' basements, playing video games and watching porn, and this is their life. And no wonder they're depressed and suicidal. It's an addiction, like other addictions.
What's the linkage between freedom and sovereignty?
Mystery. I think that's a mystery. Do I have the freedom to be here? Or does God make me be here? Do I have a choice to be here? I think when we are led and walk by the Holy Spirit, that's the better picture than the choice between sovereignty and freedom, meaning God's leading us every minute of every day is His sovereignty and our ability to do that is our freedom, if you will. I think the best picture of divine sovereignty and human responsibility is Joshua 1, where God says, "Go take the land I've already given you." There's a divine sovereignty there. It's yours. It's already done. Jericho's going to fall. You're going to have the land. It's done. But there's a human responsibility. You still got to go take it, Joshua. And then, by the way, you get to Joshua 5, and it's most theologians believe Christophany, and Jesus meets Joshua and says, yeah, I'm not on your side. You're on mine, and here's the marching orders. You're going to get the marching band, and they're going to do the craziest, dumbest thing in the world. It's so absurd that we'll be talking about it thousands of years from now. And they're going to march around the city and blow trumpets. This is the battle plan. That's divine sovereignty and human responsibility. In case you're wondering, Joshua, yeah, you're going to go with your marching band. And then the walls are going to come down, miraculously. And I've got this all in my hands. You still got to go.
Still got to blow the trumpets.
Got to go. Got to blow trumpets. Got to go into the city when the walls come down. But in case you think it was about you, you were blowing trumpets and marching around the city.
We have such a culture of you, it being you, the
We
rags
do.
to riches story. It's like you must succeed, be the
Yeah.
best, be famous.
Yeah, it is. It is. I was thinking the other day, because I was somewhere there with selfie sticks. And I thought the selfie generation has become the self-centered generation. We're desperate for people to look at us. Look at me. Look what I did. Look where I am. Look where I've been. Look who I'm with. And I'm going to put it out on social media so you look at me more. The selfie generation is the selfish generation.
My third core value is surrender control.
Mm-hmm.
So that I feel like kind of aligns a little bit with sovereignty a little bit. It's like the more I learned, the most suffering I endure is when I'm trying to make something go my own way, when I'm trying to control something. Even if it's a good thing, if I'm planning a set to go a certain way, I want to plan things to go well, I want to prepare, I see how it's going to play out. That's all the suffering comes from that. I'm late to the set now because there was an accident on 95. It's like, you just...
Yeah, it's where disappointment comes in. You're disappointed because you have a picture of what you think should be happening, and you don't get your picture, and now you're disappointed. Now you're angry with God because one of the problems we have is that we think God works for us, not the other way around. We think that this is my life, and God should bless it, and he should do all the things that I want him to do. And when he doesn't do what I want him to do, then somehow that is a problem with God. It's completely backwards. We are, it is a God is in control, and we are his servants. One of the lessons I learned was in the ministry, and one of the things I really I had done wrong was I'd given my life to the ministry. And having been beat up and left under difficult circumstances, one of the things I said was, I will never give my life to anything again because it's not mine to give. I'm a slave. I'm a servant to Christ. And slaves don't get to give their lives to another master. My life can only be as a servant to Christ. And these organizations that want you to give your whole life to them, that's ridiculous.
Not to play the devil's advocate, but if what you argue is know who you are and be it, how is that not trying to control things?
Well, because of where it starts. It starts with know who you are because God made you this person. Know who you are and be the person God made you. Again, potter and clay, and to his glory, it's completely different. Mm-hmm. It's saying that I'm not telling God what I want to be and what I want my life to be. I'm saying to God, this is who you made. What do you do with this life?
Is there a linkage between generosity and success in the business space?
Yes, there absolutely is. Not that people who aren't generous don't wind up being successful too, because they do, but for the most part, the people who are givers are more successful. And they don't just give resources, they give of themselves, they give their time, they give their wisdom, they're givers.
To once more play the skeptical devil's advocate, you have a room like Timothy Foundation or your birthday party where the Eagles are coming together, they're grouping. For the outside onlooker, oh, it's a bunch of people that are all in an echo chamber. They believe in God. They're all God people, and that's why they're successful, because they're just sharing the God feeling. Or is it something deeper than that? Is it no? There's a core purpose. There's a core understanding of what drives, and that is what people align with. Tell me about that.
I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question, but so you're going to have to answer it again. But I want to tell you, one of the coolest things about my birthday that night was that weeks later, my wife was down with me at that club, and we were together down there, but she wasn't with me at the moment. And one of the servers for that dinner came up to her and said, "Mrs. Perkins, I want you to know something. I was serving that, and your husband is really loved." And I thought, I can't think of anything better for the staff there to say. I wish that as Christians we were more known for how much we loved people than how right we are, or how much we accomplished, or how many people we got to agree with us. And, Jesus is pretty clear about this. That you love one another. I was told early in my ministry years, the previous guy who had that job sat me down one day at lunch and he said, "Bob, the scripture says to speak the truth in love, and you have a lot of truth and not much love." And he was wrong on both accounts. I didn't have that much truth. And I actually did really, really love those kids. But I was hiding behind what I thought was truth, because love seems so weak, and love is not what we're asked to lead with. And love doesn't get you numbers that you can report and raise money with. And at that point, I really chose to pivot and to say, no, I really do love people. And what does it mean now to speak the truth in love? It's why I say to the bully in the poisonous person in your team, it's not just fire them. The first thing is to come alongside them and say, "Buddy, I don't think you like who you are. How do we help you? Because if you're this way at work, you're probably this way at home. You're probably this way with your kids. You're probably this way on the golf course."
I've had a few folks lately on the podcast talking about gun violence prevention, and each one they really know this problem, and in Philly in particular, and the solution is in relationships, and it starts in elementary school. Loving people in elementary school. But it's really hard to report numbers on that.
Right.
If you're putting resources into loving elementary schoolers, you're not going to see the results of that for maybe 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. I've said with Timothy Foundation, I will never know if it's successful, because we're dealing with guys in their 20s. Our first class was, in 2020. I won't know if they're successful until they're in their 50s. That's, 30 years from now. I hope I'm dead. So we'll never know if it's successful or not. But there's a great Mother Teresa quote. Senator Mark Hatfield was visiting her and said to her, how do you stand it, keep going with all and not seeing any success? And Mother Teresa said, God has not called me to be successful. He's called me to be faithful, to just be obedient.
Pulls us back to your process you said earlier. You're all about the process.
Yeah. And just look, this is the pot that God has called me, has made me to be, and I am to be that pot. The success, the results are God's problem. God has called me to be faithful. We do the Timothy Foundation out of faithfulness, obedience to say, Lord, you called me to do this, and I'm doing it out of obedience. Now, it happens to be the biggest joy of my life, and I think that's how it all comes together, is that when we are being who he called us to be, when we are obedient to that call, it will be the greatest joy. But the results are God's.
What's next for you?
Timothy Foundation, this is the time when we're taking applications. Application deadline is October 1st every year. So there's a 7-week window now or something leading up to that. Application is online at timothyfoundation.com. And applications come October 1st. And then we evaluate the applications and invite some to come to our first weekend, which is in January in Naples. And I affectionately call it Rush Weekend because I was a Rush chairman for my fraternity many, many years ago. And that's the second vetting weekend, and then you go on from there. But applications October 1st. It's graduation weekend is the first weekend in October. We're doing my 70th birthday in that same October weekend, which I can't believe.
All the Eagles are going to come.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if they want to flock again. I don't know. And then I'm leaving 2 days later and going to France for 3 weeks to actually celebrate my birthday. And then we do have a really exciting new thing with Vision for Your Life. The Vision for Your Life course has been just only in person, only live, and you recorded the sessions for us, and we have a tool now to evaluate life histories, and so the whole thing is going to be online, and we hope to launch that in the next couple of months, maybe even weeks. And this is going to be a dramatic change because it was very expensive to do it in person, and now this is going to be affordable for almost anyone to be able to go through the Vision for Your Life process. So it's a huge, huge change for us.
Where can we find you, and where can we find Vision for Your Life?
Yeah, so visionforyourlife.com, the Timothy Foundation, thetimothyfoundation.com.
Bob, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's great. Thank you. This has been wonderful. I appreciate it.